Welcome to our annual University of Washington Worker Memorial Day event. I'd like to start our event by centering ourselves in a land and labor acknowledgement. It's vitally important for us to know the longstanding history of where we are and what has shaped the context of the land that we inhabit. The University of Washington School of Public Health acknowledges the Coast Salish people of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and lands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land was stolen by European colonizers. It was stolen from the Duwamish, who are still here and continue to honor and bring light to their ancestral heritage. This country was built on stolen land with the exploited labor of enslaved African peoples, as well as the exploited labors of Asian and Latinx peoples. These acts of colonialism, white supremacy, and anti-Blackness are the history of this country, as well as our ongoing and current reality. We want to honor and recognize the lives, knowledge, and labor of Black and Native peoples in the past, present, and future. There's an immense need for action within the School of Public Health and all other systems that's centered on liberation for Black and Indigenous peoples. This requires understanding the context of where we are, our own positionality within those systems, and a dedication to justice-based action. Today, we're gathered to pay tribute to the dozen workers in King County who lost their lives from workplace-related injuries and illnesses in 2021. Our speakers will address how worker power in the 21st century is improving working conditions in our region. First, I'd like to introduce our UW students who helped to organize our event this year, Ali Clonch and Shoaib Lagheri. They're going to serve as our Masters of Ceremony today. Ali Clonch is a PhD student in Environmental and Occupational Health and an occupational health trainee in the Northwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety, which is part of the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences in the School of Public Health here at UW. Shoaib Lagheri is an undergraduate student assistant with the Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies and an undergraduate student in economics. Ali, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right. April 28th is Worker Memorial Day in the United States and the rest of the world. It's a time to honor workers who have died on the job. This is a day of remembrance and action for workers who were killed, disabled, injured, or made unwell by their work. Worker Memorial Day is an important day for us as students and all people across the world to reflect on why we train and pursue careers in occupational health and stay committed to ensuring safe and healthful workplaces for all workers. I will now turn it over to Shoaib.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shoaib. Like Ali said, the importance of Memorial Day, I appreciate everyone coming here for this event. As a student in the economics department, I just want to say, I see a common perspective of growth and productivity by any means necessary, and often that's at the risk of the health of workers and the safety of workers. And I think one place that the economics department, economists, policymakers, all around the United States can be better at is understanding workers as people, as prioritizing their health, understanding they have family and other concerns. And it's unfortunate that so many people have had to pay the price of bad work from economists. So hoping, I appreciate the Labor Studies Department and the Department of DEOHS for setting up this event. And to go back to the program, what I'm here to do is introduce Dr. Kim England, who is a professor of geography, adjunct professor of gender, women, and sexuality studies, and Harry Bridges Endowed Chair in Labor Studies. She is an amazing leader. I've worked under her for over a year, and she's an amazing activist. So please join me in welcoming her to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you. That was lovely, Shoaib. According to a recent Gallup finding, 68% of Americans approve of labor unions these days. And even before the pandemic, 48% of non-union workers indicated they would join a union if they could. Our state has now got the third highest union density in the US. 19% of us are in a union. Given that each International Workers' Memorial Day reminds us to remember the dead and fight for the living, it is so very fitting that this year's keynote speaker is Katie Garrow, the Executive Secretary Treasurer of MLK Labour Council and a proud member of Labourer Local 242. Katie was born into a working class family in Washington's Grays Harbor County, where her father was a union boilermaker and her mother worked in rural economic development. She witnessed firsthand the decline of such logging towns like hers in the area. I'm also a geographer, so I think geography matters in who we become as people. In an interview following her appointment, which was unanimous, by the way, in terms of the way it was voted for, Katie said, and I quote, "My vision is to continue the great work we've been doing by helping workers win strong contracts, bringing the benefits of a union to unorganized workers, and fighting for racial and social justice." And then she added, "People want a future where all workers have a living wage and dignity, and these are things that unions must organize around." Katie has been involved with the MLK Labour Council for almost 10 years, initially as a delegate and then as a staff member. And before that, she was a union representative for public sector workers with ProTech 17 in Seattle. Of her many achievements there, I am going to show my bias and flag that she lobbied and campaigned and developed policy that protects, that benefits workers, particularly around universal pre-K, paid parental leave, the fight for 15, and the creation of the Office of Labour Standards in the city. Katie got a start in the labour movement working with La Razo Centro Legal in the Bay Area, where she organized day laborers and also, very dear to my heart, domestic workers. Katie has dedicated her working life to making the labor movement relevant and representative of women, people of color, the LGBTQ population, basically workers who have been left out and at times excluded from our unions and American prosperity. I speak for everybody here, I'm sure, when I say thank you, Katie, for being our keynote speaker today. Katie's presentation is called Worker Power in the 21st Century. Take it away, Katie.
Wow, that was quite an introduction. Thank you, and it's good to meet you here, Kim. Really appreciate that. Well, good morning, brothers, sisters, and siblings. It is likely that every one of you knows someone who has died at work. And I'd like to begin by just taking a moment to close our eyes and picture someone you know who died on the job. If you don't know someone who died at work, I'd like you to think about someone who has passed away due to the toll that a lifetime of labor had on their mind and on their body. Just close your eyes, think of them and the life they lived. Remember them on this day and commit to fighting on their behalf to make our workplaces safer for all of us. Because of my line of work as the leader of King County's central body of unions, I unfortunately know many workers who have died on the job. Today, I'd like to share with you the story of Caleb Brown and that of my dad. I didn't know Caleb personally, but I feel connected to him nonetheless. Caleb was hired by Coalview LLC in Centralia, Washington in August of 2018, 21 weeks before he died there. Just weeks before Caleb started at Coalview, my dad had been laid off from the company. Coalview said that layoffs were a cost-saving measure to make profit goals. But the truth was that my dad had raised safety concerns with management, and he'd been discussing unionization with his coworkers. Calling it layoffs was just a way that companies like Coalview get around our outdated labor laws to retaliate against workers. Coalview was contracted by another company called TransAlta, who had been running a coal mine and a power plant in Centralia. Coalview was hired to do environmental remediation, to clean up the less desirable coal that was discarded into the human-made ponds of water to sit while the higher grade coal was sent to the power plant. If coal were tuna, this would be the place that the canning grade would wait its turn. My dad was hired to be a hand, his term, not mine, at this operation, and to clean and prep the coal in the ponds to be burned at the power plant. He was 57 years old when he started at Coalview. He just needed to work 5 more years in order to be eligible for Social Security. When he got hired, we were all so excited. Previously, he'd been making $15 an hour at the Great Wolf Lodge, where he was a pool maintenance technician. Coalview would pay him $24 an hour. He'd have to work 4 12s and a graveyard shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. But this was life-changing money. This is the kind of money that takes you from ramen to real food. My dad spent his whole life risking his body for work. First as a union boilermaker, building the Satsup's nuclear power plant, and later for our town's sewer department. In his younger years, he'd spent time working out on the water on a barge, pushing logs with what I imagine was a large stick, but was probably a more sophisticated device, down the Chehalis River for cranes to pick up. When he heard that his job at Coalview would be to operate a dredge in these large coal ponds, suctioning up the coal to be processed at the nearby plant, he figured he could do it. He'd worked on water before. What he wasn't prepared for was the dystopian hellscape he'd be working in. Coalview was a place where workplace concerns, excuse me, where corners were repeatedly cut and safety measures were put aside in order to maximize profit. My dad quickly realized the real danger that he and the people he worked side by side with were in. He tried to make things better by raising safety concerns, talking to his coworkers about unions, but before he could make a difference, as I said, he was laid off. Soon after my dad left, Caleb was hired. I imagine he had the same excitement that my dad had had just months earlier. He was 25 years old when they hired him. Caleb and my dad both worked graveyard shift. Workers at Coalview rotate stations. When he died, Caleb was working the dredge station. By my dad's account, it was the most dangerous job. December 29th, 2018 was a cool, rainy evening. The sun set at 5:26 p.m. and Caleb's shift began at 6. So by the time he headed out to the dredge around 7, it would have been dark. My dad recalled that there were no lights over the coal ponds, and where the barge sat was in these coal ponds that spanned acres and acres of land. The ponds might be 1 acre large or several acres large. On the night that Caleb died, I imagine that he, like my dad had done for 2 years prior, put on heavy rain gear, rubber boots, a life vest, and he stepped off of a jerry-rigged dock down into a small tin boat to row his way across the coal pond over to the barge. Upon arriving at the barge, he'd tie the rowboat to the side and climb up a ladder. That night, Caleb would leave the dock and never return. At 7:59 p.m., Caleb Brown died on a sunken barge in a coal pond. No one was there to see it sink. 15 minutes after it had gone under, someone up at the plant noticed the power to the dredge was off. They called Caleb on his radio, but no one answered. According to the Mine Safety and Health Administration, who investigated Caleb's death, Caleb died because, and I quote, "the mine contractor did not have sufficient policies or procedures, and the mine contractor conducted inadequate on-shift examinations and took no action to correct hazardous conditions." According to the Department of Labor's website, Coalview LLC was issued a penalty of $45,782 in fines for Caleb's death, the price of a new Ford F-150. To date, Coalview has still not paid the fine. Caleb's death was preventable, unnecessary, a complete tragedy. Caleb left behind a partner named Brittany and a 3-year-old son. He would have been 29 years old this year if he had lived. Coalview killed Caleb, and they are responsible for his death. People often find it unsavory to talk about things like this. And as for me, I'm just not sure why the protection of life is a partisan issue. It seems to me like some things should just be sacred. Accidents happen at work, but who seeks to prevent them? Since our inception, labor unions have been the driving force for worker safety in this country. Washington State has seen a jump in new union members over the pandemic, as you heard from Kim. Who's organizing these new unions? They're millennials and Generation Z. We represent more than 75% of the newly organized workers in unions over the last 10 years. Every day in my job, I meet with union members and I ask why they chose to organize. And in almost every case these days, it's about safety, the risks associated with reopening. The boss wouldn't enforce the vaccine mandate with customers. There was insufficient staff to patrol social distancing requirements. There were poor or no notifications when an exposure to COVID-19 had occurred at work. Who's been willing to risk their jobs for they and their coworkers' safety? It's young people, and in many cases, it's BIPOC young people who are leading multiracial groups of their coworkers at Amazon, on Staten Island, in 26 Starbucks retail stores nationwide and counting, in the tech room at the New York Times, at REI. I am a millennial worker. And I, like these workers who are fighting for and winning unions in their workplaces, we are neither lazy nor entitled. What we are is clear-eyed about who would protect us and who would let us die on a factory floor for an afternoon of profit. We are awake to the fact that we are the first generation in American history to be worse off than our parents, the first generation to endure 2 financial crises in our working lifetime. And as a result, I join my voice in the chorus of young workers across this country who are questioning the myth of meritocracy and the holiness of work. We want to be able to afford childcare and have the energy to play with our kids after school and after our work is done. We want to feel safe and comfortable at work from COVID-19 and from bigots. We want adequate compensation, but not because of greed. What we're really after is a better life than the one we grew up in. We are not willing to work and die. Protecting the lives of workers is literally the least that a boss can do. Caleb's death haunts me to this day because it could have been my dad's. We can mourn the dead and also make something good come from this tragedy. And we do this by fighting like hell for the living. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I think I speak for everyone when I say that was very inspiring, and the way that you described everything, it's like I could see it. Next, we will be moving on to Dr. Mike Yost. Oh, you can see all of the comments for you, Katie. Yes, next we'll be moving on to Dr. Mike Yost. He is the professor and chair of UW's Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences. He is also the director of the Pacific Northwest Agricultural Safety and Health Center at DEOHS, and he will be leading our memorial recognition. Take it away, Mike.
Well, thank you, Amy. So over 1 million people here in Washington State go to work each day. And these workers and their families fully expect that they will return home to the safety they have there at the end of each workday. On Worker Memorial Day each year, we pay tribute to the workers who did not come home because they died of an on-the-job injury or illness. The University of Washington Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences hosts this event each year as part of our mission to improve occupational health and safety through our research, services, and training programs. Last year, 106 workers died in Washington State. Our ceremony today focuses on those workers who died on the job in King County. In 2021, 11 of the state's 106 deaths were in King County, and they died from a variety of causes, including infections, motor vehicle falls, homicide, and being struck by falling objects. And 3 of them died from COVID-19. These workers were a phlebotomist, a registered nurse, a construction worker, a millwright, food manufacturing workers, dental technicians, tow truck drivers, and a deputy sheriff, to name a few. We would like to share with you a video with the names of the King County workers who died in 2021, their occupations, and the causes of death. And after this video, we'll have a moment of silence to honor them. Can we please start the video?
I miss you, Dad.
Thank you for sharing that moment of silence, and we honor those who died on the job this past year. I'd now like to pass it to Mike Crane to continue our message about the living.
Good day. My name is Michael Crane, machinery mechanic here at the university. We'll see Local 1495. I would like to take this time to introduce our moving forward session, where we remember those that have died on the job and renew our commitment to protect the living. following speakers will share new legislation, policy initiative, campaigns, and other activities that are being carried out in our region to prevent deaths, illnesses, and injuries in the workplace, and how we can achieve more just and equitable workplaces. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marissa Baker, Industrial Hygiene Program Director here at UW. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for joining us today. So today I unquantifiable numbers or unknown numbers. As a scientist, these can be really frustrating, but I'm hopeful that my brief remarks can convince you that as labor activists and folks who are allied with occupational health and safety, that these are the numbers that are driving movements and sustaining hope. These unknown and unquantifiable numbers are vital in our fight for worker. The first unknown number is in regard to COVID-19. Despite attempts at calculating numbers, we will never fully know the toll that COVID-19 had on workers. Washington State Department of Labor and Industries tells us that between March 2020 and June 2021, there were 7,201 accepted workers' compensation cases of COVID-19 infection as a result of work. This included 123 hospitalizations and 36 fatalities. However, we know these numbers are an undercount. Many workers didn't file a claim with L&I. Perhaps workers didn't know that they got infected at work. Perhaps they didn't work in an occupation that was covered by labor and industries, or they were scared of employer retaliation if they reported. So despite the great data that we are lucky to have at our Department of Labor and Industries, and despite being truly lucky to have one of the best workers' compensation systems in the country, we are still undercounting the toll the pandemic had on workers. It is an unknown number of workers who were infected at work, an unknown number who had to go to work sick because they had no other option, an unknown number of workers who had to choose between losing their job to stay home with a child out of school or keeping their job and risking exposure. An unknown number of workers who died as a result of catching COVID-19 in the workplace. An unknown number of workers who were infected at work and then infected their family or community members. And an unknown number of workers who were not given the health and safety supports they needed in order to safely work during the pandemic. I suspect, and in fact I know, this unknown number is high. Remember, 75% of workers have jobs that can't be done at home. What we also know about these numbers is they tend to be lower in unionized workplaces. Recent research just out this week found that unionized nursing homes across the US had 11% lower resident COVID-19 death rates and 7% lower worker infection rates compared to non-unionized nursing homes. These unknown numbers empower me and many on this call to keep up the work that we are doing, to better understand the toll of occupational illness and injury, and come up with interventions to decrease that unknown number. The other unknown number I want to talk to you about is exciting, and it's also giving me hope and motivation to continue the work I do. Right now, 154 Starbucks stores in the USA have filed petitions for a union ballot. When I looked earlier this week, that number was 151, so it's going up every day. Of the stores that have voted, 33 have voted in favor of unionizing. This week alone, since I looked 2 days ago, that count has increased by 2. The unknown number here is how high can that go? There are 8,947 company-operated Starbucks stores in the USA. I don't know how many stores will unionize, but the thought makes me excited. This is an unknown number that I want to be as high as possible. And while it doesn't come without hurdles and hard work, it is steadily ticking up. This unknown number propels my work because a unionized Starbucks will result in better working conditions, better pay and benefits, and ultimately increased worker health and well-being. The same can be said about Amazon. Momentum is gaining. Amazon has over 110 active fulfillment centers in the US. How many are going to unionize? While the number is unknown at this point, the number is at least 1. And then, of course, what other unknowns are there? Who's going to be next? So today and every day, we remember the workers who were counted, whose names have been read. We also remember the unknown number of workers who were not counted today, and recognize that it is the unknowns that can motivate us to keep fighting and sustain our movement. Thank you.
Hello. You can see and hear me, I assume?
Yes.
Thank you. So my name is Jason Sokoloff. I'm a librarian. And before I read my script, I just feel compelled to acknowledge how inspiring everything. This is my first time at this event. And you'll learn more about what I'm doing with my colleagues in a second, but especially Katie's keynote address just reminds me that, you know, I think no one, including me, thinks of librarians as being comparable in the dramatic ways that people can end their lives. You know, we kind of sit, we sit in offices that are heated or air conditioned with, behind in cushy desks. We're not working in coal mines or engaged in physically risky behavior. But that said, I can't help but think, as Katie invited us to think of colleagues that have died at the workplace. And I think about someone who died in 2018, a senior library administrator at the UW. His name was Charles Timberland. He was 70 years old. He was working part-time, and following some calls about the fact that he had been working late in his office at his cushy desk, and it resulted. They found that he had died just of natural causes, and the event was shocking. I still remember like it was yesterday, the emails that went around and the notifications and how sad it was. But I think even more than being sad, and that's the common response, I was angry with Charles. I mean, not for. I mean, he was a dedicated employee. He was a respected librarian. I respected him greatly, but dying at his desk seemed like a bad precedent to set for the rest of us. And among the many emotions flowing, I realized that this was also, while odd, legitimate. And I think of him all the time in the work that I'm about to tell you about. Sorry, I'm going to go over my allocated time by a minute or so. So again, I'm Jason Sokoloff. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a librarian at the Foster Business Library. The Business Library is one of 16 libraries across the UW campuses that provide collections and services to support the research needs of faculty, students, and staff, and the larger research community. Centrally positioned to carry out the university mission across disciplines and subjects, academic libraries are often touted as the heart of a research institution. But that reality is that our heart has long labored under cardiac arrest. For years, my colleagues have observed and felt the impact of high turnover, shamefully low pay, and a poor record for recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce. With the guidance and support of amazing organizers at SEIU 925, my colleagues and I won our first union in June of 2021 and are now in the midst of bargaining our first ever contract. I've been proudly serving on the union bargaining action team in pursuit of improved working conditions for my UW Libraries union colleagues. Our membership includes 130 librarians and professional staff who provide expertise and mastery in publishing, preservation, technology, and management of information resources. Also management of facilities, of personnel across the libraries, including the Gallagher Law Library, and along with the University of Washington Press. Serving on the bargaining team has been some of the most meaningful work of my career. As we proceed, I'm continually humbled to contribute to the standard setting that aims to correct some of our employers' previous miscalculations and neglect for library workers, and the inherently high standards that will be established for future professional staff with our charter contract. Equally inspiring has been the chance to plan and collaborate with union member colleagues like my fellow panelist, Emily Verbanczyk, who will now tell you a bit more about our progress.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Emily. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a librarian at Odegaard Library and a member of the UW Library's Union Contract Action Team. The Contract Action Team has been working with our colleagues to increase member engagement and collective action. Like Jason, I find this work incredibly rewarding, and I've enjoyed seeing how our collective voice and actions move the UW to pay attention to our demands for a more just workplace. As a new union, member engagement, as many of you know, is essential. For example, we have open bargaining meetings to meet our goals of transparency and open communication. Recently, over half of our union members attended a bargaining meeting, and several members shared powerful testimony about how our proposals would positively impact their work, as well as their personal lives, including the health and well-being of themselves and their families. Since October, we've had several public campaigns, and we'd like to share a few of our recent campaigns today. We've launched a public petition and email campaign to push our library administrators to ensure library workers, including all student employees, receive proper COVID safety equipment. We created and delivered tongue-in-cheek Valentine's messages to Provost Mark Richards in order to push labor relations to deliver more timely proposals at the table. And we created and handed out over 800 zines to students, which addressed, as Jason said, the library's record of high staff turnover, low pay, and paltry retainment of a diverse workforce. We paired this with a student and community-focused petition, which has over 500 signatures to date. We couldn't have accomplished these successful campaigns without the support of our union members, students, staff, and faculty, and the larger UW labor community. As we continue to escalate our actions to win our contract, we're interested in coalition building with others on campus. If you're interested in meeting with us, want to be alerted of future actions, or want to show solidarity, or vice versa, please fill out our form, and thank you so much for your time and attention today.
Evelyn, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Evelyn Faye Tagana Romano. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Washington, where I earned my Master of Public Health and Master of Social Work last year, as well as my Bachelor of Arts at the UW in 2010. I am also the daughter of two UW custodians. My mother, Evelina, has been a custodian at the UW for 33 years now. And my father, Joey, was a UW custodian for 25 years before he passed away. So I have some very deep roots at the UW. When Governor Inslee announced the Stay Home, Stay Healthy order in March 2020, my mother and her colleagues did not have the privilege to stay home. So I decided to deliver breakfast and thank you notes to my mother and over 30 of her coworkers as a sign of my appreciation and deep respect for them and their profession. Before I knew it, this small act of kindness became a full-blown advocacy effort that is now known as the University of Washington Custodian Project, which is a community-driven, volunteer-led advocacy project that is not affiliated with the UW. Through appreciation efforts, arts, and education, it aims to uplift custodian voices and wisdom, foster understanding and respect, and change culture and material conditions for custodians at the UW and beyond. And this culture shift includes viewing custodians as public health workers and guardians of our spaces who keep our communities healthy and safe. I ended up delivering breakfast, thank you notes, and masks to all custodians across the UW Seattle campus several times, and showing up for them in this way has allowed me to develop trust among custodians. And this photo on the screen is from one of my breakfast deliveries. Yeah, very early morning, so that's why it's so dark. So many custodians I consider my aunties and uncles, not because we are biologically related, but because they've known me since I was a child and have watched me grow up throughout the years. I also facilitated photography-based storytelling sessions with 16 UW custodians focused on the health impacts of their workplace and home. Majority of the participants, like my mother, were immigrants and refugees. And during these sessions, I heard stories of fear of COVID-19 infection, uncertainty due to confusing guidelines and vaccine eligibility, lack of respect from people on campus, and the physical demands of the work. I brought these stories to UW Building Services leadership, and we did work together to ensure adequate access to PPE and linguistically accessible COVID-19 resources. And through these sessions, we created a traveling photography exhibit called Invisibility that shares their photographs and stories and allows people to view custodians holistically as humans who have hobbies and practice different religions and cultures outside of work. These efforts organically directed my advocacy for ongoing policy change, community organizing, and direct service. Some advocacy efforts based on needs identified by custodians included supporting others in winning hazard pay and wage increases, organizing a letter writing campaign to Governor Inslee to include custodians in early vaccine eligibility, and fundraising nearly $40,000 to support identified needs, including grocery gift cards, masks, and safe, comfortable shoes. The community building efforts included creating a safe space for custodians to truly share and honestly share their experiences and ask difficult questions, connecting with other people who have friends and family who are custodians, and providing consultation for those who would like to replicate aspects of the project to advocate for custodians and other workplaces. And my efforts in shifting minds and culture focused on raising awareness and inspiring action through photography exhibits, writing, and working with press to highlight experiences of custodians, and encouraging acknowledgement and recognition of custodians by coordinating what must be at least 1,000 thank you notes by now. And so the project is deeply rooted in respect, acknowledgement, and appreciation, and continues to evolve based on shifting custodians' needs. Countless people have shared how the UW Custodian Project has moved them, their friends, and family to think about the people who clean their spaces and how to show them deeper respect and care. Building personal relationships with custodians have provided a unique insight into the complexities of custodial work. And I hope that this project continues to mobilize individuals and organizations to intentionally create a culture of care and policy centered around custodial workers' voices and essential contributions. And the very last thing I'll share is that the Invisibility exhibit of custodian photography and stories is currently located in the Health Sciences Building on UW Seattle campus and will be there until June 10th. My father actually cleaned health sciences for the last 7 of his 25 years as a custodian before he passed away. And since his birthday is in May, I wanted to honor him in this way. And yeah, in the chat, I'll just include the website and my email in case anyone would like to connect with me and or the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Madeline?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. My name is Madeline Benoit, and I'm a strategic researcher at UFCW 3000. I use she, her pronouns. UFCW 3000 is one of Washington State's largest labor unions. Our union proudly represents over 50,000 members working in grocery, retail, healthcare, meatpacking, cannabis, and more across the Pacific Northwest. I too graduated from the University of Washington with my master's degree in public health during the summer of 2021, not at all sure where I would end up working in such turbulent times. Through valuable connections from my mentors at the University of Washington, I was introduced to UFCW 3000 and was immediately immersed into a world where I felt that workers were heard, understood, and valued. The past year that I've spent with the union has been among some of the most rewarding of my life because I can see my contributions directly improving the lives of workers across the state of Washington. I promise I won't say this phrase again for the rest of my presentation, but I feel we really haven't left these unprecedented times that we've been living in for the last 2 years. As of April 2022, the pandemic has killed almost 1 million people in this country. Grocery workers make up the majority of our membership, and they've been greatly impacted by this virus. Grocery store workers were amongst the first to be infected by COVID-19 at the very start of the pandemic. 2 years later, grocery workers are still bearing the burden of this virus. A survey and study of grocery store workers provided troubling insights over the working conditions experienced by our membership due to the trickle-down effect of broken societal systems under additional strain from the presence of this virus. Over 2/3 of workers reported experiencing verbally abusive customers, while another quarter reported violent incidents in stores. Workplace stress has been reported by over 3/4 of workers, which follows them home in the form of ongoing depression and anxiety. With the pandemic, several issues in grocery have moved to the forefront and become major concerns for our membership. These include providing solutions to mitigate violent incidents in stores and evaluating changes made to e-commerce carts to fulfill an increasing number of online orders. Unfortunately, it feels like there's a violent incident televised in this country every single day, especially where firearms are involved. On February 8th of 2022, one of our members was wounded while working at the Richland Fred Meyer, while an Instacart shopper was killed during this attack. Our membership lives in constant fear of violence in their workplace, and we are coming together in solidarity to elicit much needed change. We recognize that these workers, these people, have been ensuring that the doors are open and the lights are on for the entire country to have access to food while putting their health and lives on the line during this pandemic. Collective bargaining is one of the most powerful tools to improve the lives and working conditions of workers across the state. After weeks of hard bargaining, I am very pleased to tell you that we currently have tentative agreements in place with grocery employers, which are being voted on all this week. These tentative agreements include some of the best wage increases in our union's history, including hard money at the top of the scale and new money throughout the pay scales. Most critically, these agreements address pay inequities across departments so that historically underpaid departments filled with women and people of color, such as deli, bakery, e-commerce, fuel, and others, are paid more equitably. Additionally, UFCW 3000 is working to support and unionize workers within the cannabis industry by centering racial equity to reverse harm from the war on drugs. We've been a key leader in coalitions and advocacy groups that work for real change at all levels of policy. By crafting and supporting targeted legislative efforts, along with negotiating the best contracts for workers, we've been able to set high standards throughout the industry. We celebrate these gains of equity and empowerment of our workers at UFCW 3000, but know that our work to promote safety and health and healthy working environments is an ongoing journey. Throughout this process, we are grateful for our membership who show up every day to provide Americans access to food and life-saving care. Our membership, our workers, are in turn what inspire me and to have me show up and do the hard work every single day. At UFCW 3000, we will never stop seeking justice, equity, and better working conditions for our membership as we move forward to the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madeline, and thank you to all our moving forward speakers. My name is Yasmin Ahmed, and I am the Assistant Director of Student and Community Engagement at the UW Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies. I will be closing our ceremony, and I would like to recognize and thank Katie Garrow and all of our speakers who inspired us today to continue our work in honoring and building worker power as well as recentering our commitment to the prevention of workplace injuries, illnesses, and deaths. We are grateful to members of our planning committee from SEIU 925, WFC Local 1488, AFSCME Council 28, the Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies, and the Northwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety. We would also like to thank Jillian Houts, John Sharp, Jill Teep, Becky Yost, and Nancy Simcox from the UW Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences for their communication, technology, and logistics assistance of the event. And of course, we would like to thank all of you for having us today and for your amazing and inspiring efforts on behalf of all workers. Solidarity forever. So as we mourn those who have passed, we also celebrate those who persevere. We will now end our program with a short video that features portraits of Latinx immigrant caregivers of South King County. These portraits of working caregivers are portraits of strength and resilience, and this video reminds us to continue to fight for the essential workers who have and continue to serve on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. These portraits were commissioned as part of a project developed by Olivia Orozco, a graduate student in the Department of Geography at the UW. Becky Yost created the video using the beautiful and poignant artwork.